Thank you, Willem. And thanks everyone for sticking with us. We're the last ones standing in between you and your lunch. So I hope we can make it worthwhile. There's a sort of nuclear clock in front of us, Giel. We're going to have to stick to the agenda a bit, or to the timetable. Thank you very much for being here.
Thank you for inviting me.
Willem already touched on it very briefly. You have quite interesting background because you've been representing the Netherlands on the Olympics, so in sports, and you have a background in banking, right? And that must position you pretty well to do what you do.
It's an interesting combination. So for me, sports has given me much on the field, but I also had several board memberships in sports, which also let me see the darker sides of sport. So that's all the more reason for me to do what I do, basically, to make sure sport is safeguarded as much from the dark side and let the good side shine through. And from the banking side, I've always found it interesting how a lot of practices you see in corporate life don't find their way into sport. The whole European model of sport doesn't help with that. But I try to incorporate what I learned on the corporate side in sports. And sometimes it's difficult, but there's definitely a lot to take into the realm of sport to improve things.
Great, because Willem also already mentioned it very briefly. You are the information coordinator, match fixing. Basically, that's what you do, right?
I try to, fight against match fixing. So some people.
That's the important one.
It's an unlucky name, but.
So you're not fixing, but you're trying to prevent.
Yeah.
Okay, so to have it clear, everyone, it's important.
No, the government budget needed some work, so that's why they.
Yeah.
No.
So what is it you do as an information coordinator in the fight against match fixing? I mean, the name itself says it already. I assume you manage a lot of stakeholders in the field. What in one or two sentences is what you do?
So basically the need for the information coordinator role, or whatever you call it, comes from the fact that the cooperation between governments, law enforcement and sports, which are the main blood groups in trying to tackle match fixing, it doesn't go naturally in any way. So basically the solution they try to find for this, and they try to do this on multiple levels of integrity, match fixing being one, is trying to put somebody independent in between the stakeholders to try and connect them, basically. Yeah.
All right. And you've been in this line of work for 2-3 years now. You had some how do you call it? You've been in the media and you've been speaking publicly on the matter as well. For instance, in the round table that was organized by Parliament last year, and you were quite vocal in that round table, and also in your position paper. You mentioned a number of obstacles, and I won't mention them all because of the time. But two of them were a lack of prioritization and capacity, and a lack of, or not always, a fully cooperative attitude among stakeholders. Mm-hmm. Is that something that you still see today? And if you do, are we then equipped for the fight against match fixing enough?
So yeah, one, I try to be as clear as possible, because I think a lot of things get lost in translation. So by being clear, I hope less gets lost in translation. I think in general we just don't know enough about the topic. We don't know how big it is. Is it more on the sports side? Is it like you and me fixing the tennis match on the club around the corner? Or is it on the high level Champions League organized crime? And all the different layers in between. I think that also has to do with the fact with that law enforcement, who is especially on the criminal side capable of investigating, doesn't prioritize this high, and that's to be understood, because if as a civilian I need to want to have a safe environment for my kids to play in. I don't want murders, rapes, and stuff happening. So where does match fixing rank on that prioritization? So that I understand, and that is not being helped by the fact that we just don't know enough about the problem. But then if we don't investigate, we don't get to learn more about the issue. So it's a bit of a vicious cycle.
Yeah.
So hopefully by taking elements of what we do know, because there are alerts, there are things clear adjacent fields, but also in other countries, what we learned from other countries. We try to at least establish some common ground and to actually learn by doing and finding out more.
Yeah.
But that's a long and slow process.
Yeah. Did you advance in the last 2-3 years that you've been in this role? Do you see progress?
Yeah, two things I can probably highlight in that respect. One is the operational side. We definitely have made steps, not just with basically the main stakeholders, but also with some of the operators in the Netherlands, but also outside of the Netherlands. So that's definitely encouraging to see. There are some experts in there who are really wanting to move things forward, and they're getting better in finding each other. So that's the one part. And the second part is we're in the middle of the reorientation of the national platform, which is basically the place where the structure where all the stakeholders should work together. And things are moving toward one centralized problem. And from there we hopefully can dissect who needs to do what, in what capacity, to actually tackle this problem.
Yeah.
So things are moving, but again, I wish they were moving a little bit quicker.
Yeah, yeah. You mentioned the national platform. That idea of having a national platform is rooted in the Macolin Convention, right? It's the for the people in the people here, it's the Council of Europe. How do you call it?
Yeah, basically it's a convention that builds on other corruption and organized crime conventions, specifically to detail out what we should do in the field of manipulation in sport.
Yeah, and it has been ratified by the Dutch government.
It's been signed.
It's been signed, not ratified yet?
No, not yet.
It's been signed. I think the way the national platform, no, I should put it differently. The Macolin Convention then suggests, or not dictates, but suggests to EU member states to set up a national platform. You already touched on it a little bit. The Netherlands has quite a specific setup for the national platform with a 3-layered approach, being operational, tactical, and strategic. Why did we choose for this model?
I think that's one is way before my time. What I can find of it, it's everybody has a different opinion on what we should do.
That's what we're Dutch for.
No, but I think one of the reasons why it's not clear is because we didn't start from a centralized problem we all agreed on. So we started, we signed the convention, we need to do something with the national platform, which makes sense. And then we started by putting some of the existing things we did on sports corruption, for instance, together with other things, and they formed in the end the structure you just mentioned. Yeah. So what we're trying to do now is take a step back and to figure out, if we have a problem and we want to solve it, what do we need, and what structure fits is fit for purpose to do so. Yeah. So we're trying to do the work we should have done probably at the beginning of the situation.
Yeah, but that's good because you're on board now. So would you agree with me, if I may give a bit of an opinion, that the setup in the UK is the best practice in Europe?
I think all setups and how good or bad they are depend on the context. I think the UK has proven to be a strong national platform, but also it's specific to the situation in the UK. We have a different situation, legislative in the Netherlands, but also political. So it doesn't if you copy the same situation to the Netherlands, it doesn't mean it works in the same way. And the same goes in the UK. It's quite good. In Belgium, they have a different setup, which is much more focused on the police. In France, they're much more focused on the regulator. So there's different ways in you can approach a national platform. A couple of key things I think you see with the really good functioning ones is that there's a clear mandate for them to operate, preferably based on legislation. And there's also centralized steering. So you can have rules, but if there's nobody telling, you need to do this, you need to do that, then you see what you see happening is parties going to look at each other. Oh, I think you should do this and you should do that.
And then it disperses a bit.
And I think with also getting a legislative basis to work together also helps in the data sharing. I think that's one of the main issue with all national platforms is how do you share data between the private parties, also the operators, and the public parties like law enforcement?
Yeah, that's interesting. That's the second element of the Macron Convention I wanted to discuss with you. The first one was the setup of the national platform. Second one, in my experience in the previous life, I was board member at IBIA. A lot of discussions we had on sports betting integrity were technically discussions around privacy and data protection.
Yeah.
Do you think that in the Netherlands we have the right setup to ensure information flow between the stakeholders in the field?
Not yet. I think we're getting a more clear picture of what the requirements need to be, and also what the barriers are that we are running into and keep running into. So part of the whole reorientation we are now in should be a privacy protocol, or whatever you call it, that ensures that we can actually exchange what we need to exchange.
Yeah, because that's a bit of a challenge, and it's a point that you more or less raised as well. Whereas the Remote Gaming Act (GOA) was intended to strengthen the information position of the stakeholders in the world of sports.
Yep.
It turns out that it's conflicting a bit with the AML legislation.
Yeah.
What is the status of this? And also, I assume that not everyone was very pleased with the fact that you.
That's an understatement.
Yeah.
So what actually happened is they wrote the Online Gambling Act, and one of the pieces that sport really lobbied for is to get information directly from the operators where it goes to match fixing. So if you have a suspicion or you see match fixing, you should report this to the sporting federation or the sporting organizer, so they can actually intervene.
Yeah.
And also to circumvent the issue with information sharing afterwards. So that got into the law, which was fine. But then, just before the law came into force, we found out with some other people that there's also a little small law about financing of terrorism and money laundering.
Yeah.
To combat that, actually. And basically what the case is if you have a suspicion of match fixing, that almost automatically means you have a suspicion of money laundering, because nobody's going to nicely declare they are fixing, which means that the AML laws, they supersede the Online Gambling Act, and whatever you see, it needs to be reported to the FIU, which basically means it goes into a black box, and you don't, well, you hopefully see it again.
Yeah.
If they declare it suspicious enough, then it goes to law enforcement, and then you need to pick it up somewhere along the lines. But
and then once, as an operator, if you do report to FIU, and you would, for instance, a theoretical example, then also inform the FA or the Tennis Federation, you would be in breach of the law.
Yeah.
Right?
Not the Online Gambling Act, but
AML law. Yeah. What is our way out of this situation?
So there was a temporary solution or fix suggested. It's called the fast lane. So the FIU picks up the signals that potentially are match fixing, looks at them, and if they are, they try to send them through to law enforcement directly or quickly, and to the dedicated law enforcement people that are involved also with match fixing. But we just had a meeting this morning. We're also running into the limitations of that solution, basically.
Of the fast lane?
Yeah.
Which is not a fast lane, faster lane.
No, it's not. It's not the speed. It's more of what signals actually come through all the way to the fast lane, because not all the things get declared suspicious.
Yeah.
And then it's stuck in the FIU if it doesn't. So that's the next hurdle to solve.
Yeah.
So I think that's definitely not a durable, sustainable solution. One, with the whole evaluation of the Online Gambling Act, this is something that needs to be addressed.
Yeah.
I think partly it can also be addressed in the setup of the National Platform 2.0, which we're working on now. Potentially you get the FIU closer, you get other, and I saw just René just left, but maybe you get some more tools to the regulator to work with.
Yeah.
Those are things that need to be looked at. But I think first we need to really have clear what's the issue, and we're just starting to really find out what in a practical sense is the issue.
Yeah.
Because first we had a law and the other law, and we have theory about what's going to happen. Now we have had, since October last year, experience and signals coming in and not coming through. So now we need to work from that to, okay, what does this mean in practice and how do we solve it?
Yeah. All right. Hey, and you talk about National Platform 2.0. How do you see the role of operators in National Platform 2.0? Because in the current setup, there's an open chair in the, so let's say, the operational layer, but the tactical layer and the strategic layer, there's no real representation of the industry. Are you of the opinion that whether a trade association or integrity body of the industry should be part of, like full part of the National Platform 2.0 at a strategic level, or do you think that operational cooperation would be sufficient?
No, I think let's first say this is my personal opinion. I think you should be part of it, simply for the reason that it's all of our problems. If somebody fixes it, you have a loss, and sport gets less credible. So potentially in the future, you don't have anything to be able to offer a bet on. So it's a shared issue, I think. So you are also part of the solution, also in some practical things.
Yeah.
I think there's two different discussions to be had. One is the operational side. I think it's quite clear. I think the issue is more at the political level, which is a bit more difficult.
Yeah. Well, luckily there's some excellent lobbyists in the room, with excellent access to the political decision makers.
And I think we should look more from the operation, so bottom up. Actually, what do we need to fix this effectively?
Yeah.
And then you are part of the solution all the way. In what way? And I think it also needs to be practical. So for every operator to have a specific seat on, I think it doesn't make sense. So if you can have some branch organizations to do this, that would be a good way to go forward. But I think we're having a dialogue at the moment anyway, or we try to keep open lines. But this needs to evolve in a more permanent solution.
Yeah, and then because we have 2 minutes and 45 seconds left, and Willem is really strict in when it comes to time. So last one. Currently, license holders, and this is probably something that we could then discuss in the National Platform 2.0. License holders are obliged to check whether active athletes bet on their own competition or their own matches. But it's practically and legally, it's very difficult to automate this process and do a sort of automatic check on this. So as a license holder, you more or less you have to do it manually, you know. And of course, I was going to say we, but I don't work for operator. But in the industry, we all know who's the like in the first team of Ajax or PSV or Feyenoord. But lower league football, tennis, etc. That's a little less known. And then, in order to be able to check that in real time, you would have to manually do those checks, which is a huge operational burden. Do you see that issue as well, and how do you think current license holders should deal with it?
Yes, I see the issue, and it's not just athletes. It becomes even more confusing if you have physios, board members, and those kind of those fall under the betting restrictions, at least based on disciplinary rules. So I think first and foremost, it does make sense that there is an obligation on the operator because they are offering a sport, and they are offering to know, or they should know their client. And also it's based on legislation that they have to have a risk profile, etc. And if you are in a position to influence the outcome of what you bet on, then that's an integrity risk. Something similar as a politically exposed person. We've talked about this before. So I fully agree there's a big GDPR issue in sharing the data, but the same goes for sport, if you want this from sport. There are some commercial companies that offer this, so that's a potential way out, but we could simply start by having a declaration in the onboarding process or in the player profile saying, okay, if you're a part of this group, if I'm a player, a board member, if I declare to do so, I'm excluded from certain sporting bets.
Yeah.
It seems like a fairly simple fix.
So it's a practical solution to a complicated...
It's not foolproof, but it's a good start.
Yeah, for sure, yeah. Willem, we have 12 seconds left.
Perfect.
Hey, so really, really super interesting. And thank you for answering all the topics of Eric. Apart-